absolute state of unfinished AAA game releases. Where do I even begin with this? So here's the thing. About a few years ago. Let me bring this up first before I start this up, because this is a subject that I am very unfortunately familiar with. I touched upon this particular subject on my YouTube channel a few years ago, before Genshin, before the dark times. How live service changed the game. A long time ago, I touched upon live service games. I stated that live service games are fine. I have very little. I don't have much against live service games. It's fine to monetize them. It's fine to continually update a game in some occasions. But my issue is if the live service game precedes the actual game itself, if it hinders progress, if it hinders the experience that a player would face, that's where I take issue. That's where I take issue with live service games in general. Loot boxes were going away, but my fear is what happens next. We've already had stuff like season passes, online passes, gacha games. I touched upon it a little bit. And I fear, at that time, 2 years ago, I literally had no idea what would happen after the fact. Fast forward to 3 years to about today, and well, what the hell's going on? The games that were coming out nowadays, when it came to live service games, when it comes to AAA gaming, it's not what it used to be anymore. Like it just isn't. Like there's no beating around the bush. Forspoken has been like overshadowed by Hi-Fi Rush. Halo, it just isn't Halo. I like the campaign. I really like the multiplayer, but I never got into the microtransaction BS, and the content itself wasn't as strong as other prior Halo games. Hell, even Halo 5 had more content compared to Infinite, and it did get content drops in a semi-frequent basis. And I'm just here like, damn, Halo isn't what it used to be anymore. I miss the days of Halo Reach. Say what you will about Halo Reach, but that was a fun game that was at least feature complete. I feel bad for Halo because I really love that series. I really do. In fact, I made like multiple videos on that friggin' thing. Well, not just multiple videos, but I touched upon Halo in my earlier days of content creation because it's a series that I feel very passionate about.
Have you ever been playing a game and it just...
Okay, bye-bye, Goat.
Perhaps it hits you with a bit of... maybe even a little...
Yeah, Pokemon. Yeah. Jesus.
Then you might be entitled to nothing. Hold this L.
Ah! MBC2, baby!
Video games have come a long way since the days of
I love the series
Pong
in general,
and
but as
text-based
newer ones
adventure
came, it just
games.
loses its greatness.
9 console generations.
It's actually funny because I did not mind it in Halo 4 or hell, even 5, because here, I will always argue that Halo Reach is the last great Halo game, period. Because 4, I love the campaign, but I didn't like the multiplayer. Conversely, I like Halo 5's multiplayer, but I really hated Halo 5's campaign. But then for Infinite, I really like the gameplay. It harkens back to Halo 5, but it's but a little more grounded and fast paced. And the story, I mean, I only played at least a chapter or 2 of it, and I liked it, but I never actually got around to complete it. But the live service BS was just too much for me. It was just too much, and I just gave up on that.
and over $1 trillion in revenue later, the games industry has grown bigger than both the film and music industries combined. More people are playing games than ever, and more games are being made. Everybody's grandma and grandpa knows what a Mario the Hedgehog is. We got companies
Mario
like
the
Netflix
Hedgehog,
trying to start their own game
my favorite
studios.
Bomberman character.
Hollywood won't stop making video game adaptations. With all the money pouring into the industry, greatly improved hardware and software, game studios are able to produce ambitious, high-budget projects that never could have been made before. And with every gaming platform having an internet connection, they can continue to update their games to patch out any bugs after release. But despite all these advancements, it seems like we've been getting more and more games released with game-breaking bugs and missing content. Well, the thing is, these advancements are the exact reason why. Before the internet became a core facet of gaming, if a studio dropped an unfinished game, that game stayed unfinished. Loading screens taking an ungodly amount of time? Get comfortable, you got a lot of waiting ahead of you. Fighting game has a single character that's better than every other fighter and completely breaks the game's balance? I hope you like mirror matchups. If a game launched in a poor state, that became the game's legacy. And there's no better example than Sonic 06.
Now that's it. I feel after Reach and the rest is dying out. I mean, future's unknown right at the moment for Halo. Only God knows what's going to happen to that.
What was originally intended to be a series reboot and a return to form for Sonic is instead remembered as the worst game in the series, if not one of the worst games of all time. Unintuitive physics, shoddy cutscenes, unbearable loading screens, questionable writing, bad dialogue, and countless bugs make the game nearly unplayable. The game wasn't just bad, it was incomplete and in desperate need of more time in development. It's not that they weren't aware of the game's issues, I mean, they were the one making it. But as a for-profit business, game devs will always be a slave to the almighty deadline. And Sonic 06 had a deadline that Sega wasn't willing to budge on. The 7th generation of home consoles had just dropped, and the game was scheduled for a holiday release. Side note, if you ever see a game drop riddled with bugs, just take a look at the calendar. Chances are you're in the last few months of the year where Santa's tax return finally hits, and he rides around dropping copies of whatever game just dropped down everyone's chimney. Sega needed that game out on all consoles by the end of 2006. But the Nintendo Wii wasn't powerful enough to play it, so Sonic Team was split in two, with one half being tasked with creating an entirely different game for the Wii, further hurting the development of Sonic 06. 2 years of developers working insane crunch hours later.
Isn't it weird that the Wii game was actually better than the
wasn't even the first time
the
Sonic
PS3 360 game?
Two separate titles. 1994's Sonic the Hedgehog
I actually liked
3
the Sonic and the Secret Rings.
were originally supposed to be one game.
Not by a lot,
so that
but
Sega could have the
I liked
first
it for what it
game
is.
Deadline. Sonic and
I
Knuckles
mean, it could be
was
worse.
later released as a
It ain't Sonic
companion
06,
piece
that's
to
much is
Sonic
certain.
3 that could be attached to the cartridge to unlock the full game. This was one of the first instances of what would come to be known as DLC. While DLC makes for a great way to add new content to a finished game, it can't really be used to polish a game that was broken on release. Nah, to do that, they gotta re-release the whole game. Introducing the Definitive Edition. If a full-price AAA game launches as a buggy, unfinished mess, just re-release the finished game a couple years later at the same price. This wasn't always done just to fix bugs. Oftentimes, game studios would add new content or quality of life changes that honestly should have been there in the first place. This practice was popularized by Nintendo's Pokemon games, which would drop a third definitive title for each generation after their initial dual releases. Since these were updated versions and not sequels, there was little reason to buy the older games after the third one drops. This trend was incredibly egregious with fighting games that oftentimes relied on DLC characters for their longevity. Companies would release their game, drip feed players content through DLC, and then eventually release a definitive version of the game with all the DLC as a big fuck you to anybody.
Street Fighter, UMVC 3, Injustice, Mortal Kombat, they're pretty guilty about all this.
Didn't even have an arcade mode, a staple of fighting games, until an update put out 2 years later. And another 2 years later, Capcom released Street Fighter V.
A good platform gaming since PS1 days, so I wouldn't know.
That's fair. That's fair. All of the DLC fighters and stages.
Yeah, I've been a part of the FGC for quite a while, like a long time ago. So this is very familiar to me.
Is a remake of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which is the 5th iteration within the Street Fighter 2 sub-series of the larger Street Fighter game series. Little known fact, This game was then followed by Ultimate Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix Pro Game of the Year Edition Magnum version 1.224744874139 ellipses Premium Definitive Edition featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series
and
with
Knuckles.
extra teeth whitening final mix for real this time. Like I mentioned before, at the end of the day,
but hold on.
Finding ways to monetize a
But there is a real follow-up to that. It was Ultra Street Fighter 2 on Switch,
game after
and that only
launch
added
is a
two
great
characters
way
like
to guarantee
Evil
consistent
Ryu and
revenue.
Violent Ken. I think those are the
God
characters
damn,
that were
some of
added.
y'all just don't seem to get full.
And then there's
But
GTA.
You know who else gotta eat? That's right, your boy. This video was sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is the best way to learn math and science in an interactive manner.
Yeah,
an
it's
online
ridiculous
learning
with the
platform
state
that
of
aims to
AAA
make these
gaming right
subjects
now.
more accessible through intuitive
Like it was
hands-on
fine back then.
exercises
Well, to
in
be
place of
fair, it was
traditional
never fine to
lectures.
begin with.
As a STEM major,
Wake the fuck up, samurai.
Oh hi.
we have false promises to make.
Yep.
Cyberpunk 2077 had to be one of the most disastrous launches of any game in recent memory. When it came to game development studios,
I was
Projekt
very
Red
hesitant
everyone's golden boy.
in buying
With nothing but a single game series to their
Cyberpunk
name,
2077
they were
only
able to
because
build up the reputation and
as
propel
much as I
themselves
was
to the forefront
excited
of
because of
industry.
the
Witcher 3 would
trailers,
go on to win nearly 300
I
Game
didn't
of the
like
Year
Witcher
awards,
3 all that
more than
much, so I
any
wanted
game
to
that
wait
ever
and
came
see
before.
if
CDPR could do no
impressions
wrong.
were
So when
good
they
enough
announced an ambitious new
to
open
buy
world
it
action
later down the
RPG
line.
with
But
genital
once the game came out,
customization,
once
everybody
everyone
went
tried it,
crazy.
I'm just
People
like,
took entire weeks off from work to free up their schedules in preparation for the game's
I
release.
dodged a
Fans
bullet.
were treating Cyberpunk like the second and third coming of Jesus.
Though to be
There
fair
wasn't
though,
even a third coming, but if
this was
anybody
only
could make it
because
happen,
I was
gamers believed it
burned
to be
from
CDPR. And in late
Anthem, because
2020,
Anthem
the game
was a
finally
game that I
released.
wanted to
Oh my
try
God.
out, and
Oh.
it was intentionally for
game
a
worth
video,
it?
but I didn't know how good or bad
Does that
it was
answer your
before the fact.
Half of the promised features never made it to the final release. The other half made it and barely functioned. The game was unplayable on
This, though-
last-gen consoles. And on PC,
This was
you need 5
legendary.
NVIDIA 3090s
Like,
cooled by jet
it was-
turbines to eke out a stable 30 FPS.
A legendary
Fans were
status of, like,
furious. The backlash
very
was so
disappointing
bad
games.
that Microsoft and Sony were forced to give out refunds, with Sony removing the game from their store entirely. 2 years, some class action lawsuits, and several roadmaps later, and the game is in a pretty stable state. It's returned to the PlayStation Store and consistently hovers around the top 50 most played games on Steam. Like No Man's Sky before it, Cyberpunk managed to redeem itself and regain the trust of players. But people don't want a redemption story. They just want the demption. That's not even a fucking word. Off in the distance,
They just want a complete
EA
game.
saw the
Like
shitstorm
it
surrounding
shouldn't.
the game's release. and said,
Usually
"I need to
it
get in on
shouldn't be
some of
that hard.
So they
but
shamelessly
in
copied
terms of
CDPR's
game
homework,
development,
the
in terms
false
of
promises, the hundreds
in terms
of
of, like,
game-breaking bugs. Even the title
yeah,
format
in terms of
the
the game
portmanteau
development,
followed by a
it's
4-digit
easier
number.
said
And
than
1
done
year following
because
the release of Cyberpunk,
the
EA
creative
dropped
side-
Battlefield 20.
the creative side of game development doesn't meet up with the business side. Like the creatives, I imagine that the developers do not want to maliciously release a game that's unfinished. I refuse to believe that statement, because I believe that the reason why AAA gaming is the way it is right now isn't on the dev side of things. It's the business side of things. Business is something that dictates what gets released and what doesn't get released, and when one should do so. So I imagine that a lot of the bugs and glitches were mostly a result of tight deadlines and essentially like tight deadlines and just trying to complete the game like as quickly as possible. Like it's money over everything. Basically, business does not see the state of the game. They only see profit. They only see profits over everything else. Like, and the state of the game is secondary. I mean, why bother finishing it if we could just complete it once the game comes out, and then we just fix it up little by little over the next few years or so. It's a screwed up situation, but that's the reality that we're living in right now.
2042.
Whether one likes it or not.
Dude, all of these skyscrapers have no collision at all.
I'm slamming into every single. Oh, there we go. That one works. Okay, that one works.
It was damage control time. Only Battlefield fans were a lot less forgiving. Today, 2042's average player count is dwarfed by even that of Battlefield 5, the previous game in the series released 3 years prior.
Battlefield
Like
5.
clockwork,
I
just a few
remember
weeks after
people crapping all over Battlefield 5, and once 2042 came out, then people just jumped to ship it to Battlefield 5 or even Battlefield 1.
343 Industries drops Halo Infinite.
This one hurts.
The content is anything but infinite.
As a Halo fan, this hurts so
with
much.
Free-to-play multiplayer, because that's just what games do these days. The game would launch with only 10 maps and was missing series staples like campaign co-op and the Forge mode. These features wouldn't be added until a year later. So what did fans get to hold them over before the live service game devs started live servicing their games? 2 maps, some belly button lint, and a slap on the ass. At least they didn't forget to include the store on launch. That's something you can count on. No matter how incomplete these games are on release, you bet your sweet Bippy the microtransaction-filled moneymaker is gonna be ready day one. But 343's corporate greed is nothing compared to that of Activision Blizzard's with their launch of Overwatch 2. Sorry, give me a second.
Well, actually,
There we go. I never played Overwatch.
I would have said
1.
1.5 really, but
hero
hey, that works too.
Just wasn't something that appealed to me. Aside from just a handful
Now, here's the
of
thing
titles,
though.
I don't play
I did play Overwatch 2 recently, at least about a month or two ago. I liked it. But honestly, it's just another one of those games where I would have to dedicate so much time and effort and money just to get good. And I decided, you know what? I already have a lot of other games that I'm already playing at the moment, so no thank you. I'm good.
Multiplayer games. But when I heard that Overwatch 2 was going to have a brand new PvE story mode, that piqued my interest, so I downloaded it and it's
just
not
that.
in the game yet. Okay, well, the game is free to play, so I might as well
the
give it a
business aspect
shot.
also makes some works
Funny, this
devs that
looks a
create
lot
something
like
for passion
Overwatch
just
1.
turn to shit
You know,
because
I'm
gamers
a bit
think
of a
they
weeb, so
don't
I
care
wanna
about
try
players.
that
That's the
new
unfortunate
Kirito.
thing.
I wonder how I unlock her.
And the thing is, the players will only see the work that the devs do, but not the work that the business side of things do. I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, gamers will blame the developers over the business practices. And I'm not just talking about those like myself who are in tune with the game industry, who at least follow it, who have an idea of what exactly is going on. I'm talking about those that are casual gamers, those that are not exactly into all of this. So they're not in tune with the industry. They mostly play maybe 1 or 2 games like Call of Duty, FIFA, or Overwatch 2. And if they see something wrong, they're going to blame on the developers, not the business side of things. People like me, people like Asmongold, people like Young, we essentially have an understanding of how game development works. The casual players do not. And they would blame the developers 9 times out of 10. The blame should be put somewhere else, like the business side of things, like management, especially management.
Oh, it's one of these.
Oh yeah, that Battle Pass. Yay!
The new content, aka the 2 part of Overwatch 2, wasn't in the game, and the Overwatch part was now the same game with updated microtransactions.
Daily playtests and feedback have given us confidence that we're creating something you're going to love.
Jeff Kaplan says otherwise.
We want to get the game in your hands soon.
Nah, you mean you want to start lining your pockets soon. Overwatch 2 isn't a sequel. It's a monetization overhaul patch. They promise you new content, announce that the new content is postponed indefinitely, then release the game without the content under the guise of early access. Early access to what? The fucking cosmetic store? Studios release unfinished games simply because
it's the same freaking game, though.
The option to patch it later is always there, so there's really no incentive to stop them from putting out a work in progress to start profiting as early as possible. They could easily just delay the game and only drop it when every feature is complete. I have no problem waiting for a game I want to play. Your favorite game gets delayed, you go and complain in a Reddit thread. I see game delays and I get bricked up. We're not the same. But more development time doesn't necessarily mean better games. Final Fantasy 15 spent 10 years
Oh,
in the oven
yeah,
and
this
still
one.
somehow came out half-baked.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 15 wasn't even named Final Fantasy 15 initially. It was just Final Fantasy Versus 13, and it was supposed to connect it to Final Fantasy 13 in some way.
Not even everyone's beloved Elden Ring was safe. It was delayed, but still saw a ton of issues on launch. The game was riddled with performance issues on PC, and you could start most quest lines, but once you
This I
reach
do
the latter
remember,
half of the
but
game,
I think the
all of
but
the
I think the
NPCs
reason why it
collectively
wasn't as prevalent compared to 2042 and Infinite is the fact that Elden Ring actually feels like a complete game. It actually does feel like that you could do a lot of things in Elden Ring. Now, personally, I never played the game, nor do I plan on doing so because, well, it's just another Souls-like game. But I get why people love Elden Ring. I get it. I do understand why, because it's one of those games where it's feature complete, where the gameplay loop is actually fun.
One NPC had to be patched into the game entirely. Gotham Knights dropped on next-gen hardware, capped at 30 FPS with PlayStation 2 ass water physics. The Callisto Protocol
Honestly, I forgot Gotham Knight released.
We have Dead Space at home. Modern ports of older titles don't fare any better.
Side note: Is it crazy that the Callisto Protocol, like when before this game came out, the Callisto Protocol was hyped up to be one of the best Dead Space-like games to ever exist, and then once that came out, it just became another game. But then the remake of Dead Space came out, and everyone absolutely loved the hell out of that game, to the point where people were saying that the release of the Dead Space remake is very likely a point in EA's history where they're seeing an upswing. EA of all developers are seeing a redemption arc. If you told me this 5 years, 10 years ago, I would say, nah, you're crazy. But then we hear that some mobile games like Apex Legends Mobile and Battlefield Mobile are either ending service or they're canceled. It's been confirmed recently that their upcoming game with Team Ninja, I believe it's stated that there's going to be no microtransactions and all updates are going to be for free. From EA of all developers, from all developers and publishers. Now, I'm not going to congratulate them because this should be something that should be expected from a AAA developer. But I mean, give credit where credit is due. Shit. Latest example is Tower of Fantasy. The dev had a great idea and is trying to do something with it, but Tencent wants to beat MiHoYo so much they forced the Hoda studio to publish the pothole of a game, and when it reached Tencent purpose to create a stir in the Hoyo game community, and they just let the dev on their own to fix the issue that they started for Hoda Studio. Is that right? That would not surprise me if that was the case. And apparently, it ain't exactly working out for them as well as they thought. That's a shame too, because Tower of Fantasy, I did play it and I thought there were some good ideas here and there, but I feel that if they were given at least another year, I could see the game being fantastic. The friggin' game didn't even have a proper controller support. They still don't.
Last year, Persona 4 Arena dropped, and we were promised rollback netcode.
Ultimax.
Not at launch, but eventually. Eventually, months later, we got rollback. How's the player base looking? Oh boy. Persona 3 just got ported to modern platforms last week, and to rework the visuals of this 13-year-old PSP game,
I don't know if they even
Atlus
wanted to
just
compete with
AI
Hoyo.
upscaled all of the backgrounds.
I don't know, man.
Brilliant.
I don't know.
I'm sure that looks perfectly fine. No visual artifacts.
The fact that there's something
definitely
that
wouldn't have
the
looked better if you just
that the
upscaled the
Genshin,
native
that the Hoyo
resolution to a bigger
devs, sorry,
screen.
that the
Does the blurry ass text on
TOF
this calendar
devs,
say P3 or P7? Find out next time on
It's
an
hard to
episode
say.
of Dragon
It's-
Ball
it's
Z.
honestly
Every
pretty
piece
hard
of
to say.
game audio, from the dialogue to the
Hoyo
music, has been
Studios
compressed
themselves?
so
No.
many times.
It's just
it
Genshin
sounds
players
like a
comparing those two.
walkie-talkie
I have
recorded
no doubt in my
another
mind
walkie-talkie
that
was playing
the
a recording
developers
of another
of Tower of
walkie-talkie
Fantasy did not
that
want to
recorded a
compete with
PSP playing the
Genshin to
original
begin with,
game
but
audio while buried
I do
20
think that
feet
Tencent
underwater.
had something to do with it.
Here's our chance. Let's get him. Get back here, you son of a...
but the publisher is a child company of Tencent. Yep. I have no doubt devs didn't want to compete, but Tencent says otherwise.
During the 2022 Game Awards, before
Once
everyone's
again,
favorite
I
game
do not blame
developer
devs.
came through and
I don't blame
swept the
devs
show,
for this. I blame upper
Square
management. I
Enix
blame
announced that they'll
the
be
publishers
releasing a demo
for
their new next-gen title
for whatever
Forspoken
for whatever's
for
wrong.
PS5. I'd been
'Cause
eyeing
9
the
times
game
out of
for a
10, it's
while, so I
usually
downloaded
management.
the demo and gave it a shot. Most people complained about the corny-ass dialogue, but that didn't bother me. I didn't exactly have big expectations for the writing of a game with an isekai premise. And if we're being honest, Square Enix has never really been known for their dialogue.
Nope.
Say, fellas, did somebody mention the door to darkness?
Oh my god, bro. Hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
What did bother me was that the game
In my
handled like
experience of any
complete
Tencent
cheats.
games, they'll leave the
Every
dev when they get
action
what they
had
want.
extremely
Yeah,
noticeable
yeah.
input lag. Combat was janky. The auto aim was abysmal.
Never was
Spell
interested in
swapping felt
Forspoken.
clunky, the
I never
worst
was.
grappling hook known to
I
man,
figured that it'd
and
be
the
just
open world
fine.
was pretty to look at, but was
But once I
entirely
heard it that-
devoid of anything interesting.
But I barely heard
The
about this
felt
game
more like an
like
Unreal
recently.
Engine tech demo than an actual game.
But I think
It
that's only
actually
because
wasn't even developed in Unreal.
Hi-Fi Rush
It was
may or may
using
not
the
have
Luminous engine, which is the
overshadowed
same
it.
engine used to
And
make
actually
Final
a
Fantasy
polished game.
15. Oh, wait a minute. This
miHoYo
makes
is
a
the
whole
only
lot of
indie
sense.
company that was
Some
daring enough to
folks
say
excuse
no
the
to
issues with
Tencent
the
when
game by
Honkai
saying
and Gun
this
Girl
is only
started
a
getting
demo and
huge
not reflective
player
of the
bases
final
under the
game.
radar.
My
Yep,
guy,
yep.
The game drops in a month. That month
That's
came
why.
and
That's why I
went,
respect
and
the
now-
HoYoverse devs and management, only because they have an understanding of what the player base wants at
The
some
craziest thing
level.
is that when I went to uninstall the game, I noticed an icon telling me that one of my
Now,
friends
are
had already
HoYoverse
pre-ordered the game,
perfect? No,
which was
no, they're not.
interesting because I
Because
knew this
there are
to
some
be
issues here and
categorically
there that
bullshit.
I
And on
do
their
have, like,
profile, it said that I had
that I do
pre-ordered
have,
the
but
game too.
overall, it's just.
They're literally lying to you to make the game seem more popular than it is.
I'd rather have them
But all
than
of this is nothing
Tencent.
compared to the true villains of the games industry, Nintendo. Hey, let me see that game you've been working on.
Oh God, nope,
By
nope,
Shigeru
nope,
Miyamoto.
nope.
But I'm not talking about Nintendo.
Nowadays, a
That's
lot
gotta
more
wait
indie
until the
devs dare
next
to do
video.
it.
That's
Yep.
right. This video is an early
Inspirational.
access. The Nintendo content isn't dropping until Season 2. Here's the roadmap. Follow my socials for live service updates and subscribe to secure your Season 1 Battle Pass.
Ow. At least PUBG Mobile had the sense to drop 10 cents now that they're with Level Infinite. Yep. Yeah, so overall, it's just been ridiculous when it comes to AAA games. But thankfully, it seems like in some aspects, the AAA aspect of gaming that we've dealt with for the last couple of years seems to be dying off in some way, and there's room for some games out there to be on the upswing. For example, I've been playing Hi-Fi Rush, and I've been enjoying that for quite a lot. Even though and I've seen like the positive reception over that game as well. Dead Space as well. I haven't played it, but I have heard like some very positive things to the point where I do think that it's the start of something. I do think it's the start of something, but only time will tell if the market would actually would reflect that. There's still a lot of unknowns on whether or not we'll be able to see gaming be in the highlights that it was back in the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox era, but that probably won't be for a while, if ever.